Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast? Please subscribe, leave a review, comment, share, and consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, even at the producer and sponsorship levels. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Irvin Nugent about emotional intelligence and emotional triggers in the workplace. Irvin Nugent, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Jonathan, thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, I'm excited for our conversation today. We're going to be focusing on a topic that I really love. You do a lot of work in the emotional intelligence space. And so we're going to be focusing on that and talking about managing our emotional triggers at work and how to have more emotional intelligence in the workplace. As we get started, I just wanted to share Irvin's bio with everybody. Irvin Nugent possesses 15 plus years in senior leadership roles in organizations of various sizes, stages of growth, and different sectors. He understands challenging business environments and has worked extensively with executive leaders and emerging leaders, helping them reach the next level. Irvin specializes in helping leaders expand their emotional and nonverbal intelligence so that they are better able to connect, influence, and assess credibility. Drawing on his extensive experience as an executive coach and trainer, he understands that leaders are most effective when they are able to read the emotions of themselves and others in any given situation, as well as assess the credibility of the people in high-stakes scenarios. Born in Northern Ireland, Irvin brings to his practice a rich and varied experience. Growing up in a society torn apart by division and violence, he has seen firsthand the damage done when communication breaks down and people fail to listen and understand. He is passionate about empowering leaders with the tools to build trust, make deeper connections, and communicate more effectively. Dr. Nugent is honored to be the only certified Paul Ekman International Trainer in the USA and offers a wide range of workshops in the areas of emotional intelligence, nonverbal communication, executive presence, and lie detection, which are based on the practical application of scientific research. He's a graduate of the executive coaching program from Georgetown University and is an ICF certified professional certification coach and an ATD credentialed master trainer. He is the author of the book, Leadership Lessons from the Pub. I love it. I love everything about your background and your bio, and really interesting as well with your origins in Ireland and the geopolitical conflict there, which is super interesting as well, and just adds a little bit of extra depth, I think, to what you bring to the table for these types of discussions. So thank you for joining me today. Anything else you would like to share with listeners by background or personal context before we launch on in?
No, not really. I mean, I think one of the things I would just say, you touched upon it there. I think because of my background, I think it placed in my heart, just a desire. Why I'm fascinated with emotions is that I've seen what emotions, how they can tear apart relationships, how it can lead ultimately to violence. And it's placed in my heart just a really desire that as human beings, we can do better. We can do better with each other, and we can certainly do better in the workplace.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And I've read some really good books about the history of Northern Ireland and the conflict there. A recent one, I don't know if you've seen this book, what's it called? All the Walls in Belfast or something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great book. Anyways, it's a wonderful thing to explore for anyone listening who may not be terribly familiar with the background, the history there. Well, Irvin, again, as we start with talking about this topic of emotional intelligence, while I think most listeners at least have heard that term and they kind of loosely understand what it means, it's part of the common vernacular, I think, in businesses today. Yet I still think a lot of people have some confusion about what emotional intelligence actually is, as opposed to just throwing out the term. So maybe we can start there. Start by describing and explaining for us a little bit what it actually is, what it means, why it's important in the workplace, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, great question. And actually, there is confusion because it's a catch-all term. It's not. It's often compared to IQ, but IQ is a very precise term. Emotional intelligence tends to encompass a lot. The way I like to explain it is a person who has got high emotional intelligence is able to do four things very well. One, they're able to be very self-reflective and self-aware. They know what's happening in themselves any given moment, what emotions they're having, their triggers. Then they have a set of tools to manage those emotions. That's the self-regulation. The third part is they're able to read other people, pick up the signs of other people, have empathy to make connections to other people. And then finally, they put that all together and being able to manage relationships to have the best possible outcome depending on the situation. And just looking at all of that, it's critical in the workplace because, the workplace is revolved around human relationships. And to the extent that we are able to manage those relationships, is a make or break for leadership and managers and how they bring people around them and how they motivate people and really successful outcomes.
You describe that really well, in really practical way. I think that we can observe both within ourselves and those around us and our teams, and we can think about our effectiveness in self-monitoring, our emotional intelligence and the emotional triggers that we have. If we're aware of them, then we can manage them a little bit better. We can cope perhaps a little bit better. And like you mentioned a few minutes ago, ultimately, that I think emotional intelligence is one of the keys to effective, sustainable, and thoughtful relationships. And leadership is all about relationships. It's about influence, and influence happens through relationships. It happens through building trust with people. And I've said this before on the podcast, I'll say it again. Some of the dumbest people I know are the most brilliant people. Really high, crazy high IQs, genius individuals. Their emotional intelligence is really low though. And so in practicality, their ability to get things done, their ability to accomplish stuff and to work with people in teams collaboratively in organizations is really low. And so it's a problem. Like we need, of course, we want competent, capable people who are intelligent. So IQ is important, and skill and competencies are important, but the emotional intelligence piece is just so vital. And without it, so much of what an organization is trying to accomplish is going to come to a complete standstill.
Absolutely. And it's the difference, I always say, the way I like to explain in very practical terms, it's the difference of someone walking into a meeting, getting triggered in that meeting, beginning to react or in a way that they're not even aware of, and shut the meeting down or say something that shuts another person down. And the other person who's able to go in, feel the tension in the room, know it's going to be a difficult meeting, know that there's someone there that presses all their buttons and is ready for it and is able to be a little more proactive and thoughtful in the response. That's the difference. And that creates a totally different outcome.
Yeah. And as you were describing that, I was thinking of just a couple of weeks ago, a personal failing I had in a meeting. And it was exactly like you were describing. I knew going into the meeting that there's a particular individual who could push my buttons. And I knew what I needed to do. I knew that it would be a problem if I gave into that, right? And gave them what they wanted. And I did really well for like 90% of the meeting. And I just got worn down. And by the end, I ended up saying something I shouldn't have said, which is exactly what they were trying to get me to do. And, it derailed the meeting, right? And then all of a sudden, then I have to do damage control instead of actually being productive and really trying to accomplish what we wanted to do. And that's what we're dealing with in organizations. Now, in this case, there really was someone, I think, who was purposely trying to push my buttons. That doesn't always happen, right?
No.
And most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time people are doing the best they can, and inadvertently they don't even realize they're pushing your buttons. In this case, I think that was actually happening, but I still should have known better, and I still should have been able to monitor better and control myself a little bit better. That said, we find ourselves in those situations all the time, and people will say things without even knowing that they're triggering us. Absolutely. Yet the trigger happens. We feel the emotion. The emotion is real. Whether our perception of the reality around us is completely accurate or not, it doesn't really matter, because we're feeling the emotion. So then the question is, what are we doing with it?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a term I like to use, Jonathan. It's that we have a fingerprint, and we know that our fingerprints are unique. We also have a trigger print, and everyone's trigger print is unique. Some of it is the same, depending on evolution to some things, but most of it's through our experience. It's through growing up, etc. And we have no idea of what another person's trigger print is. And we can have this throwaway comment. We can say something sarcastic, and all of a sudden, without us even knowing, this person is in a spiral downwards, and we've either shut them down or we've made them aggressive, etc. So, the ability to first of all be aware that that's happening to us in the moment, but then also just from the other perspective of sometimes we're kind of mystified as where is that coming from? Like what's that? That's a very heavy or energetic response, and I'm not sure why that happened. And often it's there. It's like, oh, so something I said, and maybe it may not be the direct result or intention, but that's what it's caused.
Yeah, and I think that's why we just need to be generous with each other and quick to forgive, generous with our assumptions and our interpretations, and quick to seek forgiveness, right? And to apologize. It always blows my mind when I see leaders who, there's definitely a mentality amongst some leaders that they can't admit fault, that they can't apologize. Yeah, and I don't get that. I understand that if I apologize to somebody, that there are people that might try to use that and exploit that perceived weakness in some way. That can happen, but the vast majority of people are going to very much appreciate your authentic caring, your authentic contrition, and your desire. Like most people don't expect perfection. They don't expect you to do everything right. They understand that things are going to happen. You're going to mess up. Everyone has setbacks and mistakes, and everyone has to iterate and learn and grow. The question is, can we provide the space for that to happen for ourselves, for our team? And that takes a high level of emotional intelligence to be able to do that, and to feel confident and secure enough in yourself and in your people so that there can be a psychologically safe space to have those kind of conversations, to be vulnerable with each other, without someone feeling like they're going to be retaliated against, or, have their perceived weakness exploited in some way.
Absolutely. And even more so that the leader sets the tone, because what we know clearly from research is when a leader sets the tone, it sows an emotional contagion around the room and around the organization. And if a leader is defensive, if a leader is shutting down conversations because they feel attacked, that's going to feed and ripple throughout the whole organization. And if a leader, like you say, can be a little more magnanimous, can apologize, can be open, can be vulnerable. And by vulnerable, we're not even talking about your deepest, darkest secrets. We're just talking about the reality is, look, I got that wrong, or I need help. I mean, that's one of the most vulnerable statements you can say in the modern workplace, because people feel if they say that something's wrong, they may get fired or something, as simple as that. And then just one other thing I would say about emotions as well is for a leader to be curious. I always say there's a mindset, a curiosity. Human beings are complex. And as much as we strive to understand, there always will be a peeling off the onion. And so I think a curiosity around that, and then also just a humility that, at times we're going to have our bad days. I mean, Jonathan, when you were talking about that situation, you did so well. And at the end, you just said something, if we wake up and we're grumpy, if we wake up when we're tired and we're hungry, we say things, and it's just to have the humility to say, I'm not perfect, and I messed up, and I said something, and I did my best, but there we go. And that's just how I feel today.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Academy. Courses, micro-credentials, and certificates to upskill and reskill for the future of work. All HCI Academy courses, micro-credentials, and certificates are designed, developed, and delivered by award-winning and internationally renowned scholars, educators, thought leaders, executives, and practitioners. Our courses, micro-credentials, and certificates will help you make your mark on the future of work and make an immediate impact in your organizations. Check out the HCI Academy and our many course offerings and certificates to upskill and reskill for the future of work. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us. So let's talk a little bit about hidden emotions. So the triggers are often hidden. We don't know what they are. You talked about the emotional trigger fingerprint. Yep. So we have these hidden triggers. We have hidden emotions. People can be stoic. They can have, a poker face and not, try to give up, what they're actually feeling, especially if they feel like, that being vulnerable in that way could hurt them in some way. How do you approach that? Like, how would you suggest when you're coaching with leaders? Because I think high emotional intelligence, requires self-understanding, self-regulation, also requires understanding of others, and our ability to be able to read the room, feel the energy in the space, understand what's happening, is really important. But it can be hard to always understand what's happening, where the energy is coming from.
Yeah. So, I'd split that question into two parts. One is the individual. So biologically, what we know about emotions is that we have a physiological reaction to a stimulus, which is an emotion. And that happens before we are consciously aware. And because of that, what happens is sometimes emotions will slip out in our face. And there are 7 universal emotions, which research has found to be consistent, no matter who it is, where they are, their culture, their gender, etc. And it's biology. So basically, by the time we have become aware and said, "Oh, I don't want to show that I'm angry," that's already what I say is leaked out, and we can be trained to recognize that. And that's kind of hiding some of those suppressed emotions. They leak out. I always say the truth always leaks out, and how we feel. And so if we're astute enough and trained enough to pick that up, it becomes data. Not that we're going to say, "Oh, look, I just saw that you're angry," but just something like, that's interesting. So something I just said has created an emotion of anger or fear or surprise. Let me explore this a little bit more. And that's where it becomes, because you see, a leader at their best is able to read this data and then to ask some really powerful questions. Using this data then to really get to the heart of what's happening. And then the second one is more in a global, kind of that room, that energy. And it's this ability to realize that we have to take a little time to match the energy in the room. And so, if you can feel there's a tension in the room and you go in and you're like all upbeat, etc., it's going to be a fail. There's a disconnect of energy. And what really good leaders and emotionally intelligent people can do is to, okay, I need to start at this level, and then maybe I need to raise the energy. And sometimes that comes from cracking a joke, which is a very sophisticated, emotionally intelligent thing to do, which is able to kind of have people release and relax a little bit and then recalibrate and start again. So these are the really the nuances we're talking about that can really be powerful as a leader.
Yeah. I think that's excellent. And that leakage, as you described it, I've seen that a lot. Mm-hmm. And you can't make too many assumptions based on little small points of leakage, but it can be informative. Mm-hmm. And I think bottom line is, and it's not about me being able to manipulate people. right? I try to be super observant so I can understand where people are coming from, so I understand, how I can push their buttons and what their pain points are, and get them to whatever I want, and manipulate them in that way. That's not what we're talking about. And so if we're taking a compassionate approach to emotional intelligence, what we're talking about is understanding people so you know how to better support them, right?
Yeah.
So you know how to be there for them. You understand what's, at least to an extent, what's kind of going on with them, especially if they're not sharing verbally, so that you can probe and, in appropriate ways, you can ask questions to help understand better what's going on and how you can help them, right? And ultimately, that I think that's a huge part of what leadership is about, and building that trust in those relationships over time. Now, go ahead.
No, I was just, yeah, what you're really looking for is a win-win-win. So basically
Yeah.
you're able to read them, you're able to use yourself, and then also for the organization, cut through so much of the delay which happens when we miss these important data sets, which can be so informative.
Yeah. So something else I wanted to talk about briefly, your book, Leadership Lessons from the Pub. I'm intrigued by that. I haven't had a chance to read your book yet, but tell us a little bit more about the premise of the book and why you feel like the pub is important to leadership. Like, what's the core principle there that's important for us to take away?
Yeah, so I grew up in a pub in Northern Ireland. That's where I grew up. I lived above it. And as I went through many years of coaching, a constant refrain from leaders was engagement. People are leaving. There's something happening. People just don't belong. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, here's this institution which has hundreds of years, and people voluntarily go there. They create a special type of community where people feel that they don't have to be perfect people. They go with what I say, their warts, and people are happy discussing failures. And so there's psychological safety there, things that we now know are critical for the workplace, where people really want to belong. And so for me, then this was a powerful place to observe. And then also, what's the dynamics that's happening here, and what are some of the lessons for leadership?
Yeah, and so, well, I think that's a really interesting take on the history of pubs. And so, what are some of those lessons for leadership? Obviously, the psychological safety piece, that people can be their authentic self. They can be their whole self when they go to the pub. Hopefully, they can do that in the workplace. What are some of those other pieces that you detail out in your book?
Yeah, so just from the very point, the critical role of the owner or the barman or barwoman, that they set the tone, and that tone permeates. So again, leaders do that, and that we know the power of emotional contagion and how our emotions spread through. The centrality of story, and how story creates an emotional connection among people. And I think at times in the workplace, we forget about the power of story, and how story can emotionally connect us with other. In many ways, we want to inspire people, we want to give them a vision, etc. And really what we tend to do is throw a data dump at them and here are the quarterly figures. Whereas if we use a well-placed story, that can connect with people in a powerful way. How conflict is a part of life, and each of us has what I call a conflict story. And either it's something we move towards or move away. And yet in life, we have to know that story, and then we have to be able to nuance in that. In a pub, their arguments are there, and people have to learn to be able to agree to disagree, and therefore, to be friendly after that. So they're just some of the ones that pop out to me.
Yeah. Well, that's excellent. And certainly, I would love to always be in a workplace where we're like family. That doesn't mean we have to spend all of our time together. That doesn't mean we have to tell everyone every last little secret of our lives, but where we feel genuinely safe with each other. We feel that we can be vulnerable, that we genuinely care for each other, that we can be supportive of each other, and that we can do great things together. And I think that's the kind of dynamic workplace environment that people talk about, that they want, yet so often we find ourselves in toxic work environments, in unhealthy work environments, psychologically unsafe work environments, and perhaps we feel like we can't do any better, or that there's nothing we can do about it. And I think there is something we can do about it. We as leaders, anyone listening to this episode, we can choose how we're going to set the tone for our people. We can decide what we're going to model for our people. And even if we can't influence the broader organizational culture, we absolutely can influence, within our little sphere of influence, we can influence our team and our area, and we can create a really dynamic, healthy, safe culture there, just like the pub owner would in a pub. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, Jonathan. Very often I'll get the refrain back. People think, well, we have to change everything. We have to change the whole organization, and nothing can change because my boss doesn't get it. And I always say, well, okay, that's a reality that we can't change, but what can you change? So often we go to things that we are powerless over, and yet there is so much, especially with emotions, that we can change and that we have influence over. And it's amazing, when we use that, how we can actually change the circle that we're part of.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, Ervin, it has been a real pleasure talking with you. The time has flown by. We're just about out of time. But before we close, I wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, find out more about your book, where to find it, and find out more about your organization. And then give us the last word on the topic for today.
Yeah, sure. So simply my name, you can go type it in. It's my website, irvinnugent.com. I also create a free YouTube educational video every week, every Wednesday. So you can find me on YouTube as well. And all the information on the book and the training is part of that. And LinkedIn, finally just reach out and link in with me. And I would be delighted to begin a new conversation. And I think my last thought for the day would be, as human beings, every day we get an invitation. And so often it is an invitation to build a bridge or a wall. And the more bridges that we can build, the better we'll be in our lives, in our home lives, and in our work lives.
Well said. Well said. Thank you, Ervin. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected, find out more about what he can do for you. Check out his book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership: The Journey of Becoming a Truly Remarkable Leader. Early in my adult life, I learned about an Asian proverb that translates as bluer than indigo. If you think about the color indigo, it is a brilliant, deep, and vibrant blue, what some would call the bluest of blues. To have something that is bluer than indigo is rare and truly remarkable. Contrary to popular myth, there is no one-size-fits-all or cookie-cutter approach to effective leadership. There is no silver bullet, no secret sauce, no go-to model that will solve all of your problems. The truth is, great leaders have all had their unique strengths and flaws, and have all had to discover and then pave their own distinctive path in their life's journey to fulfill their leadership potential. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership will help you discover your own path and explore those ordinary, everyday actions that will help you respond to an uncertain future and produce extraordinary results for individuals, teams, and organizations. Check out Human Capital Innovations magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine with the mission to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We publish issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Take a look at the latest issue and let us know what you think. The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership: Ordinary, Everyday Actions that Produce Extraordinary Results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Please subscribe, leave a review, comment, share, and consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, even at the producer and sponsorship levels. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.